Hi YouTube, welcome to another episode of Voice Breakdown, the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices. I'm your host, Brendan Houdek, and today I'll be teaching you how to break down the voice of Bane from the Dark Knight trilogy. It's hard to believe it's been already a decade almost since this movie came out. After the massive success of The Dark Knight, we were all anxious to see how the trilogy would end with The Dark Knight Rises. Tom Hardy's Bane as the main villain did not disappoint. One of the most surprising things about Bane was his voice. First, there was this muffled quality about it because of the mask he wears. It was described that this mask actually dispenses an anesthetic to suppress the pain Bane feels. Secondly, there was almost a weak, distorted, high-pitched quality to his voice at times that also was very surprising for a villain. But sometimes these types of voices can be just as intimidating. Although a creative risk to have this kind of voice, it ultimately worked out in the end because Tom Hardy did a phenomenal job playing Bane. Let's break this voice down. Component number 0. You thought I was going to say 1. If you are a voice breakdown fan, you know we typically break down any voice using just 6 components. But every once in a while, a voice calls for more than our 6 components. This is one of those. Before we can even get into the first component, we need to discuss how we're going to get that muffled quality his voice has. This is not something we can do with the voice alone, nor do I expect everyone to go out and get an anesthetic dispensing mask like Bane has. Instead, we're simply going to use our hands, cupping them over our mouth. As we do, we get a pretty similar quality to what Bane's mask gives him. Even by just doing this, it'll be very clear who you are impersonating. But now let's get to the voice itself.
Let's not stand on ceremony here, Mr. Wayne.
Component number 1, the vocal cords. As we said earlier, for the powerful villain that he is, Bane has a very weak voice most of the time. This is going to be achieved using vocal fry. Vocal fry is that popping, cracking sound you can make with your vocal cords. Most of the time, when doing vocal fry, it tends to be lower pitched, but it doesn't need to be. We demonstrated this in our component focus number 1 video. Check out exercise number 3 in that video for a helpful way to practice changing your pitch while doing vocal fry. This is going to be important for Bane because in addition to that vocal fry quality, he often has a higher pitched voice. To be clear, there is variety to his pitch. We hear moments when he goes lower for sure, and when he is higher pitched, it is not sky high. But there definitely are moments when he will go closer to that mixed voice and head voice range, just with vocal fry at the same time. For example, let's take the line in Batman and Bane's first fight where he says, "Victory has defeated you." If you do it in Bane's voice, it sounds like,
Victory has defeated you.
Now listen as I say that line with the hands removed and without the vocal fry. Victory has defeated you. Victory has defeated you. You can hear those moments where I jump into that mixed voice and head voice range. But there is variety. Because of this variety, we'll say he has a neutral pitch, but with moments of going higher and lower. That's why we need to get skilled at having vocal fry throughout our pitch range. Both pitch changes and vocal fry are accomplished through the vocal cords themselves. A great example of putting all these pieces together and hearing his pitch variety and vocal fry is the line,
You think darkness is your ally. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.
One more thing to note here, there is occasionally some distortion in his voice besides the mask and the vocal fry. In that same fight scene, when Bane says, "members of the League of Shadows," we hear a drastic drop in his pitch and some use of the false vocal cords for that distortion.
Theatricality and deception. Powerful agents to the uninitiated. But we are initiated, aren't we, Bruce? members of a League of Shadows. And you betrayed us.
Component number 2, the larynx. Remember that our larynx can rise and drop. The higher it is, the brighter the voice, and the lower it is, the darker the voice. For Bane's voice, we want to keep the larynx relatively neutral or slightly dropped, depending on how you habitually hold your larynx. It's tempting, however, especially during moments when he has a higher pitched line, to raise that larynx. Be sure to try to keep the larynx neutral. When your larynx wants to rise, the trick to keeping it neutral is actually imagining that you are lowering it just a tad. So imagine a very slight yawn as you're doing some of those higher pitched moments.
You fight like a younger man. Nothing held back. Admirable, but mistaken.
Component number 3, the tongue. This is a very subtle feature, but there is a retraction to both the front and back of the tongue for this voice. Let's for a second take his line, "Then I will break you," but just say it in our normal voices. Then I will break you. Then I will break you. Now let's say it again with the tongue pulled back. Then I will break you. Then I will break you. Then I will break you. Then I will break you.
Peace has cost you your strength. Victory has defeated you. It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is our plan.
Component number 4, the soft palate. Despite being muffled by the mask, there is still some brightness to Bane's voice. To get that brightness, we need nasal resonance. This means that we're going to have to lower our soft palate a bit to allow those vibrations to go into the nose. You can tell if you're getting that nasal resonance by placing your fingers lightly on the nose and feeling that buzz. Having nasal resonance sounds much closer to Bane, so be sure to lower the soft palate.
Take control of your city. No one cared who I was until I put on the mask.
Component number 5, articulation. We already talked about how we want to retract the tongue. As we do, this will affect how you articulate a lot of the sounds. Beyond that, there is one major articulation issue to keep in mind, and this is that Bane's speech is largely non-rhotic. Non-rhotic means that we drop the sound at the ends of words, making it sound a bit more like a vowel. For example, you can hear this when he says, "Thank you, good doctor."
Thank you, good doctor.
This also can affect sounds in the middle of words, such as the word world being pronounced more like world.
And at the first sign of interference from the outside world.
Component number 6, prosody. The first thing to note about Bane's prosody, or his rhythmic and melodic patterns, is that his speech is pretty belabored. Because of the mask he wears, he tends to only say a few words at a time before needing to take another breath. When doing his voice, we want to make sure we have that tired, effortful quality. At the same time, he tends to exude confidence, giving you the sense that he always has control of the situation. This causes him to come across as arrogant and even a bit pompous at times, never showing a sense of being fearful. In those boastful moments, he tends to have a rising inflection.
I am the League of Shadows. I'm here to fulfill Ra's al Ghul's destiny.
Be sure to have that prideful lilt in your inflection during those moments.
It would be extremely painful for you. This is the instrument of your liberation.
Let's recap. Component number 1, the vocal cords. We'll have a generally neutral pitch, but with frequent moments of raising his pitch and occasional moments of lowering that pitch. Let's make sure to have vocal fry, along with some moments of distortion. Component number 2, the larynx. We want a neutral larynx, but need to keep in mind during his higher pitches that we might need to imagine dropping it a tad. Component number 3, the tongue. Let's retract both the front and back of the tongue. Component number 4, the soft palate. Lower the soft palate to allow for some nasal resonance. Component number 5, articulation. Retracting the tongue will affect his articulation, and we want to remember to drop those sounds. Component number 6, prosody. We want to have a belabored quality to the voice, taking breaths frequently while only saying a few words at a time, and we want to have a confident, boastful inflection.
Thank you for watching Voice Breakdown episode number 51. Be sure to check out future episodes of Voice Breakdown, the show where we teach you how to imitate some of the most iconic voices. See you next time. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.